Do you ever wonder how great leaders in the community make things happen? When they encounter new, unexpected challenges like a pandemic, how do they continue to successfully make an impact? Welcome to That Sounds Terrific, the podcast that connects you with these amazing people. Get insights on what they do to meet their goals, find out how you can help them in their mission, and learn their methods so you can be more successful at what you do. Welcome to That Sounds Terrific with host Nick Koziol.
Hello, everyone. This is Nick Koziol, and welcome back to That Sounds Terrific. I have an exciting episode today with two great people doing wonderful things in the community, Steve Esposito and Lauren Spiker, who join us from 1330 Cancer Connect. Welcome to the show, Steve and Lauren.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having us.
It's my pleasure. Like I said, we're coming in and talking to you about a very important organization, and I'd love to hear a little bit about both of you. So why don't we start with you, Lauren? Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move on to Steve.
Sure. Again, thanks for having us, Nick, and helping us spread the word about the mission that is so important to us, which is helping teens and young adults with cancer live their very best lives today. I founded the organization 21 years ago, hard to believe, after our 19-year-old daughter died from cancer. And we watched Melissa for the 2 years that she was sick, really tried so hard to straddle our two existing healthcare systems. In the United States, as your listeners know, healthcare is divided into pediatric and adult medicine, and Melissa, like nearly 90,000 other teens and young adults every year in the United States, fell right into that gap between those two systems, neither one of which knew or had resources that met her very unique challenges as a teen with cancer. So as a way to keep a promise that I made to Melissa before she died, I started the organization, which was originally named Melissa's Living Legacy Teen Cancer Foundation. And that's our original logo behind me and Melissa. And our mission then was exactly as it is today. And that is to help bridge that gap in resources. And most importantly, help our teens and young adults build a new peer community of others who understand that shared experience. So that's the Cliff Note version of how we got started 21 years ago.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear about your daughter, but what a wonderful way to celebrate her memory and to do good to the world and help other parents. As a parent, I cannot imagine going through what you had to go through. But I love that you were able to rise up and celebrate her legacy. So, Steve, how about you?
I'm the program director at 1330 Cancer Connect, and Lauren brought me on this crazy journey 5 years ago. So I've been involved with the organization for 5 years, and I develop and implement all the programs that our kids, our teens and young adults, our AYAs, are able to get resources from, as well as our parents as well.
Awesome. And in the background of your backdrop there, I see the Journeys posters and stuff. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Well, we have you.
Lauren, I'll let you take the lead on Journeys.
Well, let me provide a little context maybe that will help explain Journeys. So when people think about cancer in our healthcare systems, Nick, people don't often think about our kids. We see commercials and advertisements for little ones who definitely should not ever have to go through this experience, or older adults that have voting voices and influence in our society that drive changes for them. What we don't hear much of is our kids in the middle. Our name, 1330 Cancer Connect, which we rebranded to in 2015 after we changed our name from Melissa's Living Legacy, represents the age group of teens and young adults that we support. So kids between the ages of 13 and 30-ish. Roughly 90,000, almost 90,000 AYAs, that's the acronym in our business, adolescents and young adults with cancer, are diagnosed every year in the United States. And when you think about it, that's every 6 minutes a young person hears the words you have cancer.
Mhm.
Every 6 minutes, somewhere in the United States, a young life is interrupted. And for far too many, that interruption is forever. And for years, that population of kids had been largely underserved, and their challenges as young people were not recognized. So when we started 21 years ago, nobody was talking about AYA cancer.
Mhm.
And we jumped in the scene very early on and are very proud to say we were amongst the pioneering small group of people that recognized the very unique and unmet challenges of our teens and young adults. So that's sort of the context. And over the last 40 years, I mean, my gosh, 1971, Nick,
Mhm.
is when President Nixon declared the war on cancer, right?
Mhm.
And here we are, how many years later is that?
Yeah.
And we have seen, fortunately, tremendous improvement in survival for little ones, that one group I mentioned.
Right.
And we've seen even more dramatic improvement in survival for older adults. But just about the time Melissa was diagnosed, data came out that showed that our kids in the middle had not only not seen improvement, in fact, survival had gotten worse for our kids over those 40 or 50, I guess it's been 50 years now. So when you think about that spectrum of cancer patients, we see, like I said, great improvement in survival for little ones. Well, guess what? Those little ones become teens and young adults with cancer.
Mhm.
So that adds thousands and thousands of more kids every year that fit our profile. So now all of a sudden we're talking about large numbers of kids who need the resources and support that we provide. And so back to your original question, Journeys
Yeah.
is our annual gala that we have every year. And Steve can speak more to this in just a sec. But in that, at that event, our kids are always the stars of the show. So we work very hard all year long for the kids to give us something really cool to show our guests what it's like to be a teen or young adult with cancer, in
Mhm.
hopes that we can heighten awareness and therefore increase the support for our kids. So that's sort of the backdrop to what we do. And then I'll let Steve talk about all the great things that he gets to have fun doing with the
And
kids.
that's the backdrop in which I have here. I It's part of Journeys in like our programs that we develop here. As Lauren had mentioned, it gives our kids an opportunity to connect and voice what it's like to be a teen or young adult. And that is kind of the core of what Journeys is all about. As she said, the main performance is our kids and letting everybody know what it's like. And I get to work with amazing people in the community, whether that's local poets or art therapists or physical therapists, people in the community that help us create a performance in some way, shape, or form. It could be a melodrama here,
Mhm.
the showdown at the Saline Saloon, or we had movement, dance, and we've done a lot of different things as part of Journeys, and we bring in some amazing people in the community, and our kids get to share those common experiences and just kind of let the world know what it's like. And we do it in a fun way. And we have
Mhm.
great space. I wish I could show you the rest of the center here, but we can't do that. It's just a safe space for our kids to connect and share and open up and get to know one another and start to form a new peer community of people who truly understand what they're going through. And Journeys is kind of the highlight of the year. It's a culmination of all of our programs that
Mhm.
get built up into one special evening.
It sounds amazing, and I love that, like, your kids are all involved in the actual planning and execution of the event. And I don't know if my audience fully understands how I reach out and try to find people like yourselves to talk about and to promote, but part of it is I look for the uniqueness around some of the things that you're doing. It's important that the cause gets out there too, but one important point that you've both brought up is the population that you serve, that sort of is that area that you don't see in the public eye as much, as far as cancer goes. So can you guys talk a little bit about the challenge on trying to actually advocate for this particular age group, and kind of how that came about?
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it, Steve,
Sure.
and then you can add anything that I forgot. So I think maybe the easiest way to begin to paint that picture, Nick, would be to ask you and your listeners to remember back to when they were teenagers. Right?
Mhm.
For me, that's a long time ago. For you, not quite as long. But if your listeners can remember what it's like to be a teenager, you're just beginning to enjoy that beginning independence from your parents. Your friends are the most important thing to you, sometimes the most important piece of your universe. And how you look is, paramount in terms of importance. Those things, everything that makes you a teenager, sometimes gets stripped away overnight when you hear those words, I have cancer. Your friends who are so important to you don't know what to do. They don't know how to reconcile the fact that their friend could die. And their lives go on as it should. So for our teens, it's a very isolating experience. Poor Melissa was stuck with us 24/7, right? Now, for our young adults who aren't teens anymore, but they're still not fully independent adults, perhaps they're in college. And now all of a sudden they have to come back home and live with their parents or be taken care of by their mother or their father. Perhaps they've just started their first career job and that gets interrupted. They may or may not have health insurance, and the cost of cancer treatment, especially without good insurance, is terrible. So maybe they've just started a family and they have small children. So those challenges as young adults also are very unique to them. So to your question about what's the challenge of advocating for this group, well, if there's a parent listening out there who's ever had a teen, teenagers are kind of quirky. They either talk to you and tell you everything, or they tell you nothing. And young people think they're just, totally not vulnerable, that they're immortal. So accepting the fact that they need help is very difficult. So one of Steve's biggest challenges is getting kids to walk through our door, because we hear often from kids, what I always say is that 4-letter word that starts with F, fine. I'm fine. I don't need that. I'm doing just fine. Well, we know they don't, that they're not doing fine and that they do need our help. But it takes a while for them sometimes to realize, yeah, this is pretty tough. Sometimes we find ourselves advocating with parents, and parents are always much more interested. So if you're a teenager and your mother says something is cool, then for sure you say, I don't want to go. Right? So it's a tough group to connect with, because their lives are supposed to go on, and they don't want to be the cancer kid. Right. But over the last 21 years that we've been doing this work, there has fortunately been many changes to the landscape of care, clinical care for our kids. Our healthcare communities are finally waking up to the fact that our teens and young adults are not doing as well as they should. We're starting to see some research, thankfully, that didn't exist 20 years ago. So we're hopeful that train will keep moving, and that other groups like 1330 Cancer Connect will jump on board. But in the meantime, folks like you are really helping us spread the word, and we're very grateful for that. But Steve can probably talk about what it's like to actually work with the kids.
Yeah, it's as Lauren said, they are quirky. I remember back when I was a teen, I would never emote and talk about anything.
Yeah.
And that, to Lauren's point, it's the biggest challenge. And for me, to meet the families, to get to know the AYAs as best as possible, to make them feel comfortable, to let them know about a safe space that they can go to and connect with others who understand. You know, our mission, it really is to help AYAs, you know, you know, discover new possibilities and recover what was lost. You know, that's our main focus here. And they get to do that with other AYAs who truly understand. And to Lauren's point, people move on, right? Their friends who are so important to them live their lives, and they don't know how to react, and they don't know how to act in front of them. So they kind of get left to the wayside, and they don't have that peer community. And that's where we step in. And when they leave the hospital and the hospital tells them that, you know, go be healthy, you know, they have a lot to process. They have a lot that they've been through. And that's where we come in and we provide a continuum of support, whether it's point of diagnosis, whether it's 2 years after into remission. You know, we're here along the way. And our main focus is to help them in any way possible, and really to help them connect with other people who understand. But they are quirky. They are different when it comes to teens, and our young adults too. You know, they're going through something completely different. And to Lauren's point about expanding our mission, you know, we saw our teens coming to our center, and they were wondering, you know, I'm 20, why am I coming to a teens living with cancer center? So we wanted to expand our mission because we saw that their problems were now new problems, you know, first job, dating, you know, different things that our young adults have to start to deal with. And that's where we come.
That's awesome. I mean, it is a group of people that, especially, you know, the younger teens, that could fall very easily into the cracks. And, you know, I love that you have this sort of a comprehensive approach. Like, you're picking up things, like Lauren said earlier, about kids that have maybe had cancer as a young child, that have relapsed into the or gained a new kind of cancer, and then you kind of take over. Can you talk a little bit about, like, okay, so once someone's diagnosed, and like they need help, they obviously need help. What is your typical, like, way of outreach, of connecting with these kids? I know there's probably not a typical way, but
in an ideal world, Nick, we would know about that diagnosis as soon as possible with our connections at the hospital, whether that's a social worker or a nurse, and the families give kind of the okay for me to meet them. And typically I would go to the hospital. This past year made it a little more difficult with COVID.
Right.
We weren't able to be in the hospitals, but in a perfect world, I'm able to meet them during diagnosis, and they can start to build a relationship with me as a program director. And I'm kind of the link to them meeting others. And I let them know about what we do and how we can help them. I'm there along for their cancer experience. Most of the time, they have a lot to go through. They have a lot to process, and their main focus is getting well, in being in the hospital, and getting treatment. Being physically and ready to come over to our programs. And then when that's able and ready to happen, they would walk through our doors. But in a perfect world, I would meet them and read them at point of diagnosis, but that doesn't happen. And we are just a little known secret in Rochester, and you're helping us get the word out. But we sometimes meet them 2 years after they're diagnosed, and they said no to meeting me, because I would probably say no to meeting me too. But you know, if they come along afterward and then they understand what they've gone through, then they can meet me later down the road, and then they can come and get the resources that we can provide.
Great.
You know, we often say, Nick, as Steve said before, when our kids and their families are in the throes and goes of it, that's the most important thing. They have a plan, they have a protocol, they know what they're doing, and that there's some comfort in that. And when treatment ends and they leave the hospital, like Steve said, and their team is so excited, they ring the bell that they finished chemo, and everybody says, okay, you're done, you're a survivor. Well, it's not over when it's over. You might stop treatment, but now you've lost that key support that you had at the hospital, which becomes very tight because our kids are in the hospital for so long. But now we start to see, after some period of time, some late effects of their treatment that sometimes don't crop up for a year or two or more. Our kids have very serious medical complications as a result of their treatment. Very common cardiac, pulmonary issues as a result, fatigue, inability to get back to their old levels of activity, diabetes, weight issues are always a problem, and a whole host of other medical late effects, not to mention the emotional and psychological impact that doesn't hit sometimes until it's over.
Right.
And it's at that point that we find our kids sometimes come to us because that's when it hits them. Holy cow, nobody knows what this is like either. Nobody I can talk to about this. What's really so difficult to handle are kids that are diagnosed with secondary cancers as a result of the treatment that cured their first cancer. And we get kids going through it again, sometimes years later. So that's something also that the general public just doesn't, how would they know until people like you help us get the word out? So those are some of the things that make it challenging. But once we do get the kids walk through the door at whatever step along the way, they finally come to our group, they never leave. I always say proudly, and this is going to age me, but that's okay. I have 10 grandbabies from this group that, I feel really proud to say I've watched those kids grow up and get well and have families. And that's what makes this such a joy for me. To watch our kids that do get well.
Right. You bring up really great points. And some of my previous guests have mentioned this before, as far as like the trauma that patients have to deal with. And then there's another guest that I had on a totally different venue where I run a career support group where I try to help people find like new careers or even a new position. And we had a guest come in and talk about PTSD for COVID. And for people that lost their position because of, COVID, or you just lost their position in general, that there is this post-traumatic stress that you have. And obviously going through all those medical procedures, being out of school, having to do so many different things, there are emotional things that they haven't even dealt with yet coming out of a treatment. And they're always seeming to have to play some sort of catch up. So I love the service that you're offering, that support system to kind of help them kind of get through those moments. Because like you never really are fully healed until you're emotionally healed, right? And there's so much that goes into that. And you think about a lot of these children and young adults also have to have that fear of, is this going to come back, or am I going to get a different type of cancer because of my treatment? Because that's all in that huge packet of information folder that they get, based upon, after ringing that bell, they get discharged and say your treatment's over, but here are some other things you have to think about and worry about. So
yeah, and for parents, Nick, that's a fear, a lifelong fear.
Yeah.
I remember shortly after Melissa died, my husband was talking to a dad whose son was a survivor. And this dad said to my husband, he said, I can't imagine the hell you're in, because Melissa had just died. And Doug said, I'm not in hell anymore. I don't know where the heck I am. But he said, my husband said, I can't imagine the hell you're in. Right. Because every single day when your child has the sniffles or has a cough or is tired or gets a bruise, as a parent, that fear is always there. Yeah. And that's lifelong. So when we talk about stress, it's not just for our surviving kids, it's for parents. So we're able to help our parents get the same kind of peer support that the kids do. And that's a really important piece of what we do as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up too. I mean, I have a personal experience as a parent, and, most parents have that fear, like, what is this, what's going on, when the kid's sick for a little bit longer than normal. But my daughter, just to share a quick personal story, when she was about 1, she had some sort of, sniffles. We thought she's going to have to go on a nebulizer, because our other daughter had something similar. And I remember we had guests up from family staying with us and everything. I said, I'll just take her into, at the time it was emergency room, and we'll get this cleared up, and I took her there, and they immediately, I noticed there was a lot more concern than I thought, because she was having trouble breathing, and she ended up getting transported by ambulance to a children's hospital. So me, as the husband, had to call my wife, who I had reassured everything's fine, to tell her, you're going to want to come here because they need someone to ride in the ambulance up to the hospital. And, to see that happen and have to, I drove up, and I remember I beat the ambulance to the hospital, got there and said, where's my daughter, and they're like, not here yet. But we went through a 3-day period where, it was touch and go for her. She was only getting 10% oxygen, and it turned out to be just adenoidectomy and tonsillectomy. And it was delicate surgery because of her age and how weak she was. But while we were in there, we witnessed, because we're in infant ICU, we witnessed all these families that didn't get to go home, that kids going around the ward, with toys and things like that, playing there without their parents there because they had to work. So that also led the spark in me to want to do a lot more than I have been doing. So this is supposed to be about you and not about me, but I had to share that, because I don't think my listeners have heard that story of why I kind of do what I do to try to promote organizations like yourselves. Because
I trust your daughter is doing well now, though.
Yeah, she's doing really well.
Good.
She's doing good. Yeah, she's. I joke, and I shouldn't say this because she gets mad at me, but she's been a teenager since she was 2. She's this spunky personality, that knows what she wants and what she likes, and she's in middle school now and starting field hockey like her big sister. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you bring up another phase of the support that we provide. You said, seeing kids who don't get to go home. Our mission, as we told you, is to help our kids live their very best lives. And sometimes our kids die. And I have to ask myself, when I watch their 1330 friends deal with that grief, I said, am I really helping them live their very best lives? Because this is hard. But death is part of life. And when our friends die, we mourn and grieve and celebrate together. But that creates a whole nother host of complications for our kids. The common phrase is survivor's guilt. Well, that's real. Yeah. Our kids always ask the question, why did she die? Why not me? Why am I still here? And I like to think that whether our kids live or die, we can at least give them the opportunity to know that their lives mattered and that there was purpose in their lives. And for our kids that have to suffer through the death of a friend, I always say, our friend who just died knowing that he or she would never be forgotten, that they had an impact on you. And it's our job now to find some purpose in our friend's life. So, Steve mentioned earlier about the continuum of support that we provide. Unfortunately, sometimes that's end of life, but we're here for that too, and that's pretty important. And it makes me feel that what we do really does matter in so many ways.
No, I totally agree. I mean, your point is that you're celebrating their life, and again, through like Melissa and every person that comes through your doors, you are providing a voice, you're providing an opportunity to celebrate a person and the fight that they had, but also to use that to continue to spread awareness to others and to help them get the word out for you as well. So I mean, that's a good line with the next question. I mean, how can my listeners help you? What are you looking for in the way of volunteers and in the way of support? What are some things that they can do?
Steve, why don't you start with that one?
There are many ways. Lauren, I'm going to go on the programmatic side of things.
Sure.
Nick, I had mentioned to you, I'm not the most talented person. I look for people in the community that can provide a positive influence on our AYA's lives. As I had mentioned before, we work with local poets and art therapists and balloon art folks. Anybody out in the community that has something, a talent of some sort that they can come in and help our AYAs with. That could be job coaching. It could be how to build a resume, right? We can have programs designed around many different things. And for people out in the community to help, reach out to us and just let's start a conversation and see what talents you have and how we can benefit from those talents and how you can provide and make a difference in the lives of others. I have a friend who's a chef, and he comes in and he helps us with cooking programs. And so there's just many different ways from a programmatic standpoint. Lauren, I'll let you expand on other ways, but my mind, my heart is in our programs because I see it. I see the magic that our kids get when they connect with others who understand.
Awesome.
Not only do we get to take advantage of really great, talented people in our community, but when people can help us from a program standpoint, as Steve just explained, it also helps us from an expense standpoint. So other ways that people can help us are to help with funding. Good free will donations, of course, are always welcomed. COVID, we managed to get through the COVID 18 months, and unfortunately we're still in it. COVID hit us hard as an organization. Grant funding, for the most part, all went to recovery issues, which was well suited, of course, but our funding was dramatically impacted during COVID. We managed through. We kept our doors open and we kept the lights on, but everybody on our staff was working reduced hours, and but we made it. But it was a tough year, so financial donations are always appreciated, and I can assure your listeners that we can stretch a dollar farther than anybody I know. So every dollar is judiciously spent. We have had wonderful people in the community do their own fundraisers for us, companies that do jeans days or bake sales or craft shows or golf tournaments. So third-party events like that really wonderfully committed people can help us with is another great way for listeners to have fun, but feel like they're supporting a really great cause as well. And I think lastly, what I would say is anybody who's listening to your show today, Nick, just help us spread the word. I always say, I hope nobody ever knows a family that needs what we do, but should you let them know that 1330 Cancer Connect is a resource. We're based in Rochester, New York, but we also have a center in Syracuse, New York. So we have Western and Central New York pretty much covered. Who knows where our next center will be? So help us spread the word and just take good care of your kids.
Yeah. No, I think those are all great ways to get involved, and something that I have to remind not just my listeners, but a lot of people that there's so many more ways to volunteer for organization than just donating or even donating just your time. And I think that you both brought up some great opportunities for people that maybe didn't even think that they could make an impact. And the easiest thing is just to share, right? So like sharing this episode, but more importantly, sharing the links to your website and everything that we'll have down in the show notes for sure. But sharing that with people that are affected, even if you don't know if they or think that they need that service, just to kind of, here's another resource, right, that is available that you may have not known that it was available to you.
One thing that people can be on the lookout for. What we learned during COVID, there was a silver lining to COVID, believe it or not, and that was we learned how to better use technology to reach our kids who were not able to physically, might not have been able to physically come to our center. And we are in the midst of developing a really cool 1330 wellness app So listeners can stay alert to that. We'll have a whole library of on-demand nutrition and fitness programs that will be available on the 1330 app. So anybody that could help us advance that new technology project would be really, really appreciated.
Awesome. No, that's great news to hear, that something good kind of came out of COVID. We keep finding those little stories and slivers of how things have helped us to, utilize technology a little bit more. And I'm glad that 13 to 30 is no exception. I do want to kind of see if there's anything else that you both want to touch on that maybe I haven't even asked about yet, that you really want our listeners to know about 1330. And the services that you provide. This is usually a good stumper question too, because you're like, oh, what else haven't I shared? But yeah, anything that you haven't shared or I haven't asked about.
Well, I guess I would like to talk. We could mention a couple events that we have coming up that the public can certainly participate in. So we have a 5K walk and run every year that we call the Bandana Bolt, because everybody gets a custom designed bandana. Obviously, our kids wear them when they lose their hair. And the Bandana Bolt in Syracuse is coming up on October 3rd, which will be in person as well as virtual. So that is on our website. So anybody who would like to get some exercise and help a good cause at the same time, we'd love to have you come to the Bandana Bolt at Green Lake State Park in Syracuse in October. We talked about Journeys. Journeys this year is also, unfortunately, going to be virtual for the second year on November 13th. So we have a really, really great virtual program. The kids are working hard on their performance for this year. So that's November 13th. That also will be on our website, and any of your listeners, wherever they are, can participate in that and help us, and at the same time see some really awesome kids do a great job. So awesome. Those are two things coming up that your listeners can participate in.
That'd be great. And a good thing to note is that even if you're listening to this episode way after this airs, and these events have passed their annual thing, so definitely check back at the website for when they're coming up next. Sure. But we'll definitely promote that on social for you as well. Hey, Steve, anything else that you can think of that you want to promote for the programmatic side as well? I'll put you on the spot.
Nothing.
I don't want this to sound personal, Nick, but Steve, you might want to talk about going bald for bucks.
Yes. Yeah. So we do.
Already halfway there.
I'm right behind you. We do an initiative here. We partner with Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center out in Buffalo, and we do a Bald for Bucks initiative. So if there's any educators out there, we like to target our schools, but businesses as well. We do a Bald for Bucks program where kids can style or shave their head or donate 8 inches of their hair, and they do some peer-to-peer fundraising, and it's a great initiative, and it's a lot of fun for our schools to be involved with. We have a couple schools coming up in the fall for homecoming, and last year was a little different with everything we had going on, but hopefully schools will have a different outlook going on with COVID than last year, but Bald for Bucks is certainly on top of mind for school districts. And then we also do a Beards for Bucks campaign in November. We work with local law enforcement, and they grow beards in the month of November when they're not allowed to, and they do some fundraising for us as well. So there's businesses out there, if you want to have some people want to grow a beard and you want to donate to a good cause, please get in touch with us for our Bald for Bucks program and our Beards for Bucks program.
Okay, awesome.
And if we have just one more minute,
of course,
that I neglected to mention, which is an important piece of what we do, and Bald for Bucks reminded me of this. In addition to the programs that we provide with peer support for our teens and young adults and parents, we do a lot of outreach in the school community to help educate educators, teachers, and administrators about how to best support their teens or young adults when they're going through treatment. School is a normalizing activity that for our kids oftentimes they're not able to enjoy, and returning back to school is very difficult when they've been out. So we spend a lot of time in schools trying to tell teachers and administrators how to support their kids, not only when they're out of school, but almost more importantly, when they return to school, how to educate their classmates about what to expect when their friend comes back looking very different from when the last time they saw them, how not to be afraid to ask questions about their cancer. And we do something very similar for clinicians. We host many workshops for providers to help them understand how to communicate effectively with a teenager, how to better understand some of the very unique challenges facing teens and young adults who don't fit in either of our existing healthcare systems. So also to your listeners, if anybody is in a school district who would like some help, some information, should they have a student who is diagnosed, we're here to help their classmates and their teachers as well as primary care pediatricians and primary care physicians to understand not only the current challenges, but the late effects of their treatment as well. So those two communities also are there for, we're here to help them as well.
That's amazing. I mean, there's so many terrific things that your organization is doing. Like you said, even I think before we started recording, we could probably talk for hours and hours about all the different things that you do and how they came about. But I, as a person in the community, I just want to thank you both for providing this service to our community and helping so many kids. And I also want to thank you, Steve and Lauren, for being on the show. Again, terrific work that you're doing, and we will share all the contact information and ways to reach out to you for our listeners to hopefully participate and at the very least spread the word. So thank you both.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, and best of everything to you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Steve.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of That Sounds Terrific. Don't forget to check out the show notes and our website at thatsoundsterrific.com to find the contact information and the best ways to volunteer with the organizations that we feature. If you know someone that is doing terrific things and think they should be featured in a future episode, be sure to email us their name, contact info, and short description of what they're doing at thatsoundsterrific@gmail.com. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and give us some social media love by liking our Facebook page, That Sounds Terrific. Follow us on Twitter at Sounds Terrific 2 and Instagram at Sounds Terrific. We love hearing your feedback on how to make our show sound even more terrific. Till next time.